What's going on, guys? It's Greg here, aka New York Prepper. Just wanted to talk to you guys about the advantages of living in a cold climate if you're a prepper, or if you have a bug out location in a cold climate. So I have a list of things here that I wrote down, list of advantages, because a lot of people don't consider cold climates to be a good area to live or to have a bug out location. And in my opinion, I think that cold climates are actually superior to warm climates if you're a prepper. And for surviving SHTF, I think cold climates are superior as long as you're a fairly hardy person and you have some basic skills and some mental toughness. Cold climates, in my opinion, are superior for surviving SHTF. So I want to just go through a list of advantages here that I wrote down. So the number one biggest advantage of being in a cold climate after SHTF is that the cold weather is a natural barrier against people. So after SHTF, there's not going to be any plowing and salting of roads. Roads are going to be left alone, so ice and snow are going to cover the roads in the colder months. And that ice and snow is going to protect you from the biggest threat after SHTF, which is other people. Refugees from big cities will not be able to travel as far after SHTF during the cold months because of the roads. They won't be able to hike as far either because of deep snow and cold temperatures, which would make it even difficult for a seasoned outdoorsman to travel long distances in those types of conditions. Desperate, unprepared people will generally stay indoors in the winter months and not go very far if the roads are snow covered. And if they do try to go out, they will probably either freeze or get stuck in a ditch somewhere. Same thing with marauders. If someone wants to raid your house or they want to go house to house pillaging for supplies, they're going to really need to know what they're doing if they're going to be doing it in the winter months. Because of the deep snow and the cold temperatures, these marauders are going to really have to have the appropriate gear and equipment and skills, because doing any kind of marauding when it's 2-3 feet of snow on the ground and cold temperatures, it's going to really slow those marauders down. A lot of them are going to get hypothermia. They're going to tire out walking through the deep snow. If they don't have appropriate camouflage, they're going to stick out like a sore thumb against the white snow. If they're wearing dark colored clothes and they don't have snow camo, they're going to stick out and you're going to be able to take them out from a long distance away. So the number one biggest advantage of a cold climate for a prepper is that it's a natural barrier against people. People are going to be your biggest threat after a major SHTF, specifically refugees from the big cities. Once the big cities run out of supplies, people are going to be traveling outside of the big cities to rural areas to look for supplies and find shelter. And if the roads are covered in snow, if they're not plowed, it's going to be very hard for those people to do that. It's going to also slow down marauders. So that's the number one big advantage of cold climates for preppers. Number two is free preservation of food. So the cold temperatures are going to be like a free refrigerator or a freezer. For half of the year, you're going to be able to just put your food outside and freeze it or refrigerate it, Or if you have like a garage or some kind of a shed, you could put your food in there as long as animals don't get into it. The best thing is if you have like a garage that's not heated, because animals are not going to go into your garage unless they're truly determined. But free preservation of food. For example, here in Pennsylvania and where I used to live in upstate New York, temperatures from October through April are adequate enough for either refrigeration or freezing. So that's a big advantage right there. If, let's say, for example, you harvest a deer or some kind of wild game, you can freeze it, you can refrigerate it if it's cold outside. So that's a big advantage in my opinion. Another big advantage is that you have some tactical advantages in cold climates. One of the big tactical advantages is that you can easily conceal yourself in snowy terrain. If someone is observing you, or if you need to get close to an objective, either to observe the objective, to assault it, or just do surveillance, overwatch, reconnaissance, it's very, very easy to conceal yourself in snow, especially if you have at least like a foot or two of snow on the ground. All you have to do is just low crawl through the snow and you're going to completely disappear. And if you get into a firefight, all you have to do is just hit the floor, lay down, and you're going to completely disappear in that snow. And it's going to be hard for someone to find you. Deep snow, especially snow drifts and snow banks, tend to funnel people's movement as well as wild game. But when we're talking about tactical, we're talking about people's movements. So people are generally going to follow areas that are plowed or cleared, whether it's a road, whether it's a trail, whatever, any kind of pathway. People are naturally going to want to use those pathways rather than trudging through 2 to 3 feet of snow. So because of the fact that people are naturally going to be funneled in these areas, it's going to give you the opportunity for ambushing. If we're talking about, dealing with marauders, if there's a lot of snow on the ground, the marauders might likely just come on the road if the road has less snow on it. So it gives you a predictable avenue of approach. Also, you can overwatch those areas, but that's a big advantage right there. The snow can funnel people's movements. You can also see tracks in the snow. If you're going to be doing patrols around your property to see if anybody was scouting you out, you'll easily be able to tell if somebody was scouting your perimeter because of the tracks in the snow. Also, you can easily track wild game. Also, you can use blizzards and snowstorms to hide your tracks. If somebody is pursuing you, if you're being tracked, if you're in an escape and evasion situation, you can actually use heavy snow and blizzards to hide your tracks. And also, deep snow makes it very difficult for tracking dogs to work. Okay, tracking dogs, they don't work well if there's a foot or two of snow on the ground. So that's a huge advantage right there if you're in an escape and evasion situation, if you're being tracked. And there's actually a famous story of a Polish prisoner of war during World War II that was taken prisoner by the Soviets, and he was sent to a gulag in Siberia. He was a Polish army lieutenant. His name was Slavomir Ravich, and he was imprisoned in this gulag, and he escaped during a blizzard, so that way he could not be tracked by the Soviet prison guards with their dogs. And he actually survived, and he wrote a book about it. He walked all the way from Siberia to India, because India was part of Britain at the time, and it was a friendly country. And he wrote a book about it. The name of the book is called The Long Walk, and they also made a movie about it, and it's called The Way Back. And the movie was actually pretty popular. Colin Farrell was actually in that movie, as well as Ed Harris. So those are some tactical advantages. Another thing too is water. If you have snow, you have a basically unlimited supply of water. You can melt that snow and drink that water. You can do so many things with it. Like I mentioned, you could use the cold weather to preserve your food. You could use the snow to preserve your food. You could use ice. But you're going to have water all around you if there's snow on the ground. All you have to do is just melt it. Another thing too, another advantage is that generally speaking, colder climate areas have lower human population, and generally speaking, warmer climates have higher population. So, for example, if you look at the most populated states in America, you have California, Texas, and Florida. California has 50 million people. Texas has 30 million people. And I think Florida also has like 30 million people. So all of those states are very warm. And generally speaking, people want to move to a warmer climate because it's just more comfortable. It's more convenient. You don't have to dress up half of the year. People generally favor warmer climates versus colder climates. So in areas where there's colder climates, you have less people, which means less threats to deal with, you know. For example, not many people are battling each other to move to northern Minnesota or North Dakota, okay? So in places like that, you're just going to have less people, which is less of a threat. Also, another advantage, this is the sixth advantage, that generally speaking, in a cold climate, you have less disease and less critters. So cold climates generally have less parasites, less poisonous snakes, less critters, less disease, less pests. And that's 100% fact, okay? If you look at all the countries in the world that have the worst diseases, the worst pests, it's all tropical countries like Africa, the Congo. Look where Ebola came from. Ebola came from the Congo. You know, all the warmest climates, you know, the tropical areas is where you have the most disease, the most bugs, critters, you know, all the nasty stuff is in the tropics. So on one hand, you don't have to deal with the cold weather and the winters, but you do have to deal with critters and disease and poisonous snakes. Just look at Florida. Florida has like 4 different poisonous snakes. Here in Pennsylvania, we only have one. We have rattlesnakes, and that's it. And if you go up to places like Canada or Alaska, there's no poisonous snakes at all. So there's always a trade-off. You know, you get one thing, but you lose another. And when you go to a warmer climate, yeah, you don't have to deal with the winter. You don't have to worry about hypothermia, but you have to deal with, you know, all kinds of parasites that are in the water, you know, leeches, poisonous bugs, you know, spiders, scorpions, brown recluse spiders. You have all different kinds of poisonous snakes. To me, that's a big disadvantage of a warm climate, you know, for SHTF, because if you're going to be patrolling your perimeter and you get bit by a scorpion, or you get bit by some kind of poisonous snake, or a brown recluse spider, or, you know, you go to drink some water and you get river blindness from a parasite that gets into your eye or something like that, you know, after SHTF, you're not going to have access to medical care as good as you do now. So you definitely don't want to get a parasite. You don't want to get bit by a poisonous critter. So that's another thing. I'm not a big fan of bugs. I really hate bugs, especially spiders. You know, I'd rather deal with a raging bear than with a spider that's crawling up my back. That just freaks me out. So I'll gladly take the cold over the warm when it comes to the critters. I just hate critters. And also in colder climates, generally speaking, it's easier to find good land and build a good retreat for low cost, because in colder climates, you don't have this big surge of people trying to move to cold climates. You know, you don't have, you know, tons and tons of people moving to northern Minnesota. You know, people are not retiring to the Upper Peninsula of Michigan or you know, northern Maine or, you know, Montana, maybe Montana now, but people are not retiring to places like that. People are retiring to Florida, South Carolina, Texas. You know, those are the big ones. And the problem now, especially after COVID, is you have this huge influx of people into those areas, and the real estate prices have been crazy in those areas, and it's just very hard to find good land, good property. If there's some kind of house or land that comes up for sale, everybody wants to get it. So the real estate market in warmer climates is just not as good for a prepper. Colder climates, generally speaking, you can find cheaper land. It's more readily available. You know, you don't have hundreds and hundreds of people trying to buy that same piece of land that you want to buy. So that's a big advantage in my opinion. So that's pretty much it, guys. Just wanted to do this little video. Advantages of cold climates after SHTF. So I wanted to just give you guys something to think about if you're thinking about moving. I know a lot of people right now are thinking about moving with everything going on in the world with COVID. People are leaving a lot of the big cities and they're heading down south. And I wanted to just give you guys something to think about before you go down south to the warmer states. Wanted you guys to just think about that. But that's pretty much it. Just wanted to share this with you guys. Take care, God bless, and don't forget the 3 Ps. Prepare, practice, and persevere.